When I, and I'm sure many other fans, first heard the rumors that a Pokémon Diamond and Pearl remake for the Nintendo Switch may be on the horizon, excitement and wonder were the first two emotions that entered my mind. Up until this point, Game Freak and the Pokémon Company have had an amazing track record with their remakes. Pokémon Fire Red and Leaf Green for the Game Boy Advance, Pokémon Heart Gold and Soul Silver for the DS, and Pokémon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire for the 3DS. Pokémon remakes have become standard, as remakes and remasters in general have been in recent years, even expected whilst we were between generations. It's a great way for the team to pump out a project on the newer hardware with an established audience who are eager to experience a nostalgic retreading of their favorite Pokemon regions, without having to invest as many resources in a new generation of Pokemon and any other mechanics and assets that are required. Each of these remakes consistently delivered on reimagining and improving their originals, while still maintaining all of the aspects and mechanics that made the originals great, even adding new mechanics and story elements without betraying the source material. The idea of Gen 4, such a beloved entry, finally getting the same treatment, and with the power of a home console no less, was very promising, to say the least. A few years after the initial rumors dropped, an official trailer was released along with the announcement of the game's eventual arrival on the Switch. It was also announced that the game would not be worked on by Game Freak, a first in the history of the Pokemon franchise, but would exclusively be worked on by ICLA, a Japanese game and CGI support studio that has never before fully developed and released a game on its own. It seemed to be a one-to-one remake, even carrying over the chibi asset style for the characters while in the overworld, which was disappointing for fans who were expecting a remaster treatment like Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire got. However, it wasn't entirely disheartening, as staying so true to the original would allow it to even further induce nostalgia and a sort of deja vu when playing. The trailer was of an early build of the game, and was lacking in some finalized assets, but all in all, it just left most of the expectant audience conflicted as they held their breaths, hoping that the final version wouldn't disappoint. A few months later, their greatest fear would be realized. The audience's expectation of a remaster, a true reimagining of the title taking advantage of all of the technological progress that's been made in 14 years, was dashed the moment they first laid eyes on the trailer. But the hope for a remake that brought back everything people loved about the original was still in the air. This would unfortunately not be the case. There would come to be significant changes from the original that, while not seeming like a big deal, actively took away some of the best aspects of the original DS release. First off, they decided to remake Diamond and Pearl, not Platinum, a very important distinction. Platinum was a sort of definitive edition that was released about a year following the initial release of Diamond and Pearl, that added new dynamic features, story elements, and mechanics. One of the first big issues is they added a party-wide EXP share, which is a mechanic that was introduced in later titles, but they didn't rebalance the PvE to compensate for the over-leveling that your party underwent. So all semblance of challenge which required strategy was just gone. They also got rid of the GTS, Global Trading System, which was first introduced in Pokémon Diamond and Pearl. This is the ability to connect to the internet, set a Pokémon that you're willing to trade in exchange for another one you're looking for, and or satisfy the trade requirements of somebody else who posted their own Pokémon. Regardless, you always felt like you got a fair trade, because you chose what Pokémon you would get and which one you would trade away. Instead of this, they integrated Wonder Trades, a newer mechanic recently introduced that takes all control away, and just has you send a Pokemon out, and you just hope and pray that you didn't just trade a really good Pokemon for a stupid doof. But I also mentioned that this feature wasn't even built into the game at launch, and wouldn't be added for almost 6 months. They also changed the underground areas of the game, adding special rooms where you can encounter and catch rare Pokemon, and sometimes completely bypass built-in limitations on catching certain Pokemon before the endgame, which was pretty cool, but they completely ruined underground bases. Underground bases used to be unique places that you could furnish and customize to create your own Animal Crossing type house that you could show to friends and other players. Now it's just a room where you throw all of your statues in so that you can affect spawn rates in the wild areas. The most egregious example of changing the original was the removal of Pokemon contests. In Diamond and Pearl, there were these events called Pokemon contests, in which you were required to raise your Pokemon's contest stats, coolness, cuteness, beauty, etc., and use particular moves in the right situations in order to gain the favor of judges and emerge victorious. Contests were a very fun addition that allowed you to use your Pokemon for something other than fighting, that truly helped break the monotony of the gameplay loop at times. Surely they wouldn't take out this feature that almost every player remembered and loved dearly. Right? Right?
Well, what did they do to contests? This was like a whole other in-depth game mode in the original games.
They turned it into a one-button Guitar Hero. No, I'm not even joking. That's literally all it is. Needless to say, they completely changed this game for the worse. But I haven't even brought up the underhanded tactic that they used in order to save money on manufacturing costs. In order to pay less by releasing the game on an 8GB cartridge instead of a 12GB, they intentionally left out huge chunks of the game, such as the reorchestrated soundtrack in favor of a more compact MIDI version. The opening and ending credits animation sequences were nowhere to be found, and they even locked off certain areas in the post-game, all in order to save space, only being able to access them through a day one patch. Completely ignoring how this goes against one of the Switch's marketed features, the lack of needing to download a large portion of a game after popping in the physical version, like so many other consoles require. But this means that someday, when the Switch's online capabilities are finally shut down, like the Wii U and 3DS eShops were, it will literally be impossible to fully experience this game without resorting to homebrewing or piracy.
With over 100 new Pokémon in Pokémon Diamond and Pokémon Pearl, they're gonna be everywhere. Ready to catch, battle, and trade. Pokémon Diamond and Pokémon Pearl. Gotta catch 'em all. Only for Nintendo DS, rated E for everyone.
Pokémon Diamond was the first Pokémon game I ever played, instilling a love for the world's largest media franchise that survived for the last 15 years. I loved this game, and was waiting on bated breath for Nintendo to finally unveil a proper remake. I bought Brilliant Diamond on day one, just trying to relive the nostalgia and experience the Sinnoh region once more. I've owned the game for almost a year, and I haven't beaten it. Barely even played it past the first week. This game made me physically ill as a type of uncanny valley effect settled in, and everything I loved was just not right. Like any Pokemon game, this game printed money, as all of the hopeful fans who trusted that this, at the very least, would be an up-resed port of the original that still kept everything that they remembered fondly, were unable to get refunded once they found out that they'd been hoodwinked. I hope that somehow, the Pokemon Company learned from this experience and won't try anything so blatantly cash grabby again. I hope the Pokemon Black and White remakes won't disappoint in the same way once they're eventually announced. And I hope that someday, I finally get to experience the 4th generation of Pokemon in a way that truly blows me away like the first time I played it. Until then, I'm just going to keep playing Pokemon Platinum, which, in my opinion, is the definitive remake of Diamond and Pearl.